So the next story, let's move on to a little bit of politics news, which is the biggest kind of thing. This is like actually one of, I said this was a slow news week, but this is actually one of the most exciting weeks in Canadian politics in a very long time. We are now sitting on the eve of the end of the Trudeauocracy. And remember what I said about the end of the Bidenocracy, where it was like the movie 127 hours. Uh, the waiting for the end of the Trudeauocracy is like a nightmare on Elm Street, right? Like you think that the nightmare is ended, but it hasn't ended, and then it lasts for a few months longer, and then finally, hopefully tonight, it is truly at an end. But I don't know. We might not be getting the win that we're hoping for because we might just be swapping one monster for another, which, uh, we'll have to see about our new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, which he is scheduled to be coronated at 11 a.m. tomorrow, Friday, March 14th, Pi Day, funnily enough. But I do say the word coronation with intent because in my mind this is a coronation, right? Like this is no different than when King Charles became the king. Like I'm half expecting them to just wheel out a crown and put it on Mark Carney's head. And this is, I asked Grok to generate an image of Mark Carney as king of Canada, and this is what it came up with. um, and the reason why I say this is because if you look at the Liberal leadership race, Carney won like a super majority of the votes, like 86% or something crazy like that. Those are like Kim Jong Un numbers. Like, in case you didn't know, they actually do have elections in North Korea. And Kim Jong Un wins every single election with 99.8% of the vote. I wonder who is the 0.2% of people who didn't vote for them. You'll probably never hear from them ever again. They just disappear off the face of the earth forever. And this is kind of what it felt like when they announced that Mark Carney won 86% of the vote and is now being crowned the King of Canada. And the Liberal leadership race, by the way, I think only 150,000 people voted. So considering that Canada has a population of 40 million, that's like what, like less than 1% of the entire population voted in that leadership race. So he's becoming prime minister with less than 1% of the vote. So I don't know. I think that that's kind of maybe problematic from the beginning, but I understand that this is the parliamentary system and this is just part of the system and it's not against the rules per se, but it still kind of rubs me the wrong way, which is why I'm going to call Mark Carney's inauguration a coronation instead of an inauguration. And by the way, if you're watching this, it's probably already happened. So you'll be saying hi to Prime Minister Carney instead of Prime Minister Trudeau. And you guys know me, I'm not particularly a big fan of Mark Carney, in case you haven't noticed, right? And I don't say these things without good reason, right? We've talked about some of his gaffes and some of the things he said that are kind of maybe inconsistent in the past, especially with the, building the pipeline thing. He's saying one thing in English to people in Alberta, and he's saying another thing in French to people in Quebec. And then there was also that thing about moving the Brookfield Asset Management headquarters to New York City instead of Toronto, and he was the one that signed off on that. Although he's the one that was like pushing and this whole bunch of like anti-American stuff because being anti-American is like the biggest selling point to Canadian politics right now, right? Because of Trump. But yeah, and then also here's a picture of Mark Carney visiting a steel plant, and this is, I don't know if it's I don't think it's the same steel plant, or maybe it is, that Pierre Poilievre visited. And when Pierre visited, he had all the steel workers, the actual workers, just regular blue collar everyday citizens standing behind him for that photo. And I would say he looks pretty natural, right? And then if you juxtapose Mark Carney next to Pierre. I would say that Mark Carney looks mega uncomfortable here, and also I've heard reports that the steel workers didn't want to take a picture with him, or they didn't want to stand behind him. I don't know if it's true, but regardless of whether he just didn't want to take a picture with the plebs, or the plebs didn't want to take a picture with him. Regardless, he got a bunch of liberal MPs and politicians. I think that's Anita Anand in the back, and I think Karina Gould is cut off, but she's the one that's standing on the far left, her favorite position, far left. So I think Karina Gould is standing behind him as well. They're all wearing these like really goofy looking work clothes that look super unnatural, and it's like they're all like, I bet it's all their first times wearing this type of clothes in their lives before, because they're all bureaucrats and they've never worked a blue collar job in their life before, especially not Mark Carney, right? As a central banker. So yeah, I mean, I just found this picture kind of funny. There's nothing like particularly wrong with it. I just wanted to share that picture, right? And what I did want to talk about was, maybe just since we're on the topic of Canadian politics, apparently we've also pissed off our second biggest trading partner, which is China, right? So China announced that they're gonna impose 100% tariffs on a certain type of seed oil, which I don't want to say that word because it's awkwardly named and I don't want to get demonetized, but it's canola, right? Just call it canola, right? I don't know why it's weird named so weirdly. Canola oil, oil cakes. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's like it's like a step in the process of making canola oil, or maybe it's a cake made out of oil. Whatever it is, apparently it's important and it's a big industry, right? Canola is a big industry in Canada, and other products, other food items like peas, pork, aquatic products, just a random assortment of farm products that China is imposing a 100% tariffs on us, effective March 20th. And yeah, they say that this is a response to our tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles and steel products. So I believe that we do have a 100% tariff on Chinese-made EVs, which is why you don't see Chinese EVs driving around Canada these days, is because we've basically made it pretty much impossible for Chinese EVs to get over here, despite everyone always hearing about how China's EVs are like super cheap, right? And I know people are going to be like, well, they're not up to North American standards. They can make them up to standard very easily, and it'll still be much cheaper than all the options that are available here if they could sell them, but they can't, right? Because Canada imposes a large tariff on EVs. So yeah, there's that story. And then also there was an interview with the industry minister, Francois Philippe Champagne. What a crazy, interesting name. What a cool name. Uh, but with our industry minister, Francois, and he said that Canada will not drop these Chinese EV tariffs, despite this trade war, despite them taxing our canola 100%. So there's that. And I wanted to just highlight the importance, or not the important, but the gravity of the situation that we're in here in Canada, where we're fighting a trade war against our two biggest trading partners, the United States and China. Granted, China is in a distant second in terms of our export volumes, but the United States part is really where it hurts, where 78% of our exports go to the United States, while only 4% go to China. But still, like 4%, it is a noticeable chunk. But yeah, 82% of our exports are in jeopardy after our two biggest trading partner decided to initiate this trade war. So this is kind of the backdrop that the new prime minister, Mark Carney, is going to take over. And yeah, I don't have a lot of faith that he's going to do well, but I would love to be proven wrong at the same time as well. So I'm trying to keep an open mind. But yeah, I mean, it seems like our situation is very tenuous at best with the trade wars going on. So I just kind of wanted to get your opinion, Sunil, on what you think about, first of all, the Carney coronation. Do you consider this a coronation as well? Or what do you think about Mark Carney in general? And what do you think about the particular situation here in Canada that he's going to take over with the trade wars and all this stuff on tariffs and just your thoughts on being in Canada right now? Are you a happy camper or are you not a happy camper?
Well, I guess I am a happy camper that Justin Trudeau's gone and he's no longer prime minister. I guess he is until tomorrow morning, but we can celebrate that small point. But in terms of the Mark Carney's coronation, that's what it was. I mean, he got like 85% of the vote on the first ballot. It didn't even have to go to second ballot. So yeah, I mean, the Liberals picked their guy. I think that I guess the Liberal move is that they don't want somebody with the baggage of like being one of like Justin Trudeau's top cabinet ministers to be running the party because because that's just not going to win the election. And I think the Mark Carney kind of gives them a clean plate, and then they get to start fresh and maybe even sell themselves as having a fresh start. I mean, I think it's a little weird that Mark Carney keeps talking about how like vote for me to vote for change. They're doing the same line that Kamala Harris did in the U.S., where it's like your party's been in power for 10 years. You're claiming that you're the change candidate, but okay, that's confusing. Um, in terms of yeah, like I'm looking at the picture of the photo op and everything. I mean, it just looks awkward. That's the best way to put it. At least Poilievre didn't put on a costume when he put his thing on. I don't understand what the Liberals were thinking by putting the MPs behind them. I don't know if they were trying. If they were actually trying to pretend they were workers. I mean, there's clearly two MPs that I recognize right off the bat behind him. So it's just very awkward. But in terms of the tariffs in China, I mean, it couldn't happen at a worse time. I somewhat find it bizarre that nobody is really making any statements or deciding to say anything about this because we're getting a lot of vitriol about this like anti-Americanism in Canada, and a lot of people are very upset that they feel betrayed by America. And obviously, they're our neighbor, and they're substantially more trade is going to America than China. But I do find it weird how muted the country is and how muted our politicians are on this issue, even from the conservatives. Like nobody's really saying anything. So I'm not exactly sure why this doesn't seem to resonate with the voters. I guess it's just not like it doesn't seem to be a part of anybody's strategy to even discuss it. So definitely concerning. I don't know much about the industries. I mean, it's a farming industry. 100% tariffs is concerning. My understanding is that Canada kind of coordinated this move with the Biden administration to put tariffs on U.S. Chinese EVs. Personally, I look at this and I say, wouldn't it be nice if we had a little leverage over the United States right now? Like if we already had a deal to bring in Chinese-made EVs into Canada, and potentially even we're talking to the Chinese about building a branch plant in Canada, we might be in a better situation. We might actually have some leverage to use against the United States. For example, Mexico. It's been like widely reported that China is building car plants in Mexico, and one of the reasons why China really pushed for that plan was because it allows them to bypass tariffs and get into the U.S. and Canadian market. Specifically, China wants to get into the U.S. market, so they were trying to bypass trade rules by manufacturing in Mexico and then using NAFTA or USMCA to get the cars across the border. So it was a coordinated effort to kind of like push back and kind of protect our car industry. I've heard a lot of different views on whether it was a good move or not. But I think from a Canadian perspective, it would be nice if we were in a position like Mexico is right now, where we actually had a large country like China offering to make branch plants in our country. One of the reasons why the branch plants in Mexico is actually really important is because if they can't import the cars into America, one of the reasons why American car companies like to manufacture cars in Mexico is because Mexico has a lot of free trade deals, especially like Mexico has a free trade deal with Europe that predates the United States. So by manufacturing cars in Mexico, it actually allowed America to bypass tariffs and get their cars to the European markets with lower tariffs. So China is essentially using Mexico to do the same thing. It's the same play. If they can't get their cars in America, they can get into other markets by using Mexico. I went off on that long tangent just to say that it like our leaders aren't playing the same level of like chess as our counterparts are. Like we're just it would be so nice if Canada had like was a little bit stronger with this in this position and actually was willing to work with other world powers other than the United States. Like you look at the chart that you provided with 78% of our trade, it's so clear how reliant we are on the United States and having this asymmetric relationship with the United States. And I feel like our backs are to the wall. I don't think Carney is going to make a statement on this yet. My understanding is that Carney is currently planning on making a diplomatic trip to Europe. So I think that things are a little bit. I don't know why that's important right now. I don't think Europe is capable of saving us from this situation. I feel like we're on our own. I feel like the Trudeau government, predating Carney, has ruined our relationships with the United States. They've ruined our relationship with China, and they've ruined their relationship with India. So those are the three biggest economic markets when you factor by purchasing power parity and population. And Canada is fully reliant on one relationship, the United States, which is feels like it's falling apart. I do agree that the tariffs aren't going to be permanent, and Trump's using it as a negotiating leverage to try to force us to a table. But I guess I guess I'll go off on a slight tangent. Like America has been trading this asymmetric relationships with their allies for years, where they allow people to have asymmetric access to their economy by allowing countries to tariff U.S. goods, but the U.S. doesn't tariff their goods. It happens with Canada, happens with Europe, uh, and I guess the main thing is that like putting myself if I want to put myself in the perspective of Trump supporters, of like actual mega, I guess the issue is that if America's making asymmetric trade deals with all of their global partners, um, America might have the United States might have a good reason to do this. They might be negotiating other things like military contracts. They might be negotiating um, oh, you sign up on Paris climate, and we'll let you import cars. Sometimes America gets rid of tariffs, so they want their consumers to just have cheaper goods. So there's a lot of reasons why that happens, but the problem with it is that if the tariffs are asymmetric, it means that the American population feels the strain of the tariffs in a asymmetric manner. So like if America can't import Cadillacs into Germany because of the tariff, but Germany is able to import Cadillacs into the United is able to import Mercedes into the United States, then you have a situation where US Cadillac producers are going to feel a strain on their jobs in an asymmetric manner. So I think that this relationship has caused mega which is a political coalition which has decided we don't want this anymore. Like we don't want you subsidizing Europe and Canada's militaries anymore. We don't want you subsidizing NATO anymore. We don't no longer want asymmetric trade relationships. We don't care what the reason why you signed up for them. We want to throw it out. So my only question is, how does Canada maintain access to the American market in this scenario where they're trying to force us to the negotiating table and trying to get us to get rid of a lot of our like long-standing tariffs. And I guess the only thing I could really say is that Canada kind of needs its own like Canada First movement. We need to start interprovincial trade, pipelines. We need to stop relying on U.S. infrastructure to move our raw materials. We need to stop relying on U.S. infrastructure and U.S. ports to move our products. We need to get involved in ports, infrastructure, railways. There's all these things. Canada First means we need to build in Canada. We need to be less reliant on U.S. infrastructure. I don't believe that Canada will ever like be in a situation where like the vast majority of our raw materials aren't moving across the US border. But if we had a little bit more leverage and we were able to move our products to a few other countries, we would be in a stronger position while we're fighting Trump on this trade war. And then the other thing is that we have to become more competitive. Like if the asymmetric trade relationships are going away, and we have to pay more money for our own security because Trump's demanding we meet our NATO targets, then Canada's going to have to get more competitive because we're not able to use like an asymmetric trading relationship to to benefit our economy. Again, we're not like we have a sweet deal being America's neighbor, but America's going to force us to the table and kind of renegotiate the world's trade regime. So I guess my question is that it doesn't seem like Canada's really talking about a lot of the stuff that they need to talk about in order to get ready for this moment where we're moving towards a multipolar world, and America is kind of pulling back on its commitments at a rapid rate because their electorate is kind of forcing them to.